Hello, David. Here's some of my tools that I use um, pretty regularly, and I omitted all the buffalo and the wood and the ivory stuff because that's probably less common for nappers to start using those, but I use those quite a bit as well. So if you're having trouble breaking larger pieces, you said, um, probably starting off on the large chunks with the right hammerstone that you can spall and also thin with it will be to your advantage. Some hard slick, if the hammerstone is really slick and hard, and that's probably going to be only a good spaller at low speeds. If it's got more grit like the sandstone, then it's going to be able to catch the edge. And as you've seen in the videos before, you can use the middle part of the stone as a striking surface too, and then just create steep platforms and direct the blow with as little force as possible with those big hammerstones. And as they wear, if you don't use them for braiding, they just get rounder and smaller until they get just too awkward to hold. And if they break, they can still make nice narrow hammerstones, and this kind you can use as an abrader too because it's gritty. If you're breaking a lot of stuff, it may be due to the edge being too thick, and so guys that are used to using the carbide abraders, they can dull too many areas, and you catch the wrong platform, it's easy to break, especially if it's on your leg and it's not supported evenly. So I like to turn and finish grind late stage platforms with a harder hammerstone like this, abrader, and that way you can get a nice even grind on it. Sometimes you even use a flake. You've seen the anvil stones for pressure flaking, various thicknesses. They get too thin, they get sort of hard to hold, and they the only small points. And if you're working really little points with these anvil stones, you might want to switch to bone, or wood is not, I don't really like, but you can make a small bone one, and that way sometimes the small points want to crush as you have the ears, especially if you notch them and then you finish pressure flaking them. So maybe just a thick piece of leather for those, or bone. But since you're interested in working bigger points for pressure flaking, these anvil stones work great. They just go in the middle of the palm, and then you can pressure flake to the side of the stone. You've seen probably videos on that before. So Adrian gave me this nice gritty piece of sandstone that works as a good edge grinder. It'll really chew up the edge and turn it. Big billets for percussion. Moose, obviously, probably not archaeologically correct, but they're kind of fun to nap with. When guys buy moose antler and they grind it, don't grind it like this. That's just worn down round because it's turned evenly in my hand. You can take 100 hours worth of potential usage if you grind them. I just sort of let the big ones just kind of wear down and get ratty, and then just sort of turn them and use them. If they get too awkward, then you can take the point off, but just don't take too much of the antler off. This access gear is cheaper, and it's pretty dense, so you can use that. Mule deer, I'm not as crazy about. And elk is not very good at all. Whitetail is good. Elk can be good when it's on the skull. See, that's a dense bone. It's a little bit got a soft spot in the middle, but as I get into it, it'll get more even and hard, and then they all vary. But if just an elk shed is real soft, I mean, you can use them, but very broad facets and only early bifacing. Punches. Large, you saw the hog-eye cache. You can tie a big moose billet on a stick and hit that. I've been lately drilling a lot of antlers from this size to this size on down, finer pointed. They fit in the ends of these shafts. I've got just tapered a little bit. If they're straight, it helps a little. This one's got a little bend to it, and I had to cut these off when I went on a airport, so maybe a little bit longer. And then just make sure they're not on a concrete floor. Get them onto something soft, and then get them to where they're just springy and have a little bit of movement to them. So the cow knuckle, you saw that. You can drill bones. What else? The other kind of punches go over the leg. This one is the narrow one, and this one is beefier. Tie it around the leg here, put a pin in it, wrap the cordage around, and then get it really tight on there, get a little leather underneath there, and then you work holding the preform on the inside. And that's, if I had to recommend starting punching for somebody, that might even be one of the easier ways, depending on how big your leg is, you might need a bigger or smaller antler, but you can always add padding and stuff. So that's just another method of indirect percussion. Other kind of punches are vertical punches. The long ones, obviously, you can use on blades or really heavy bifaces, but as you finish, I did a video explaining why those don't work good to get the inward. These beefier vertical punches work good. That's awful big. It's worn down a little bit. It could be a little bit longer. Then this one I use tons. You can see the little places where it grabs. When they get pointy, you just wear them flatter. But for finishing edges, on certain kinds of cross sections, it's hard to beat these things. And I use a flat striker. You can use antler or a piece of wood or probably any kind of bone that's dense enough with a flat spot work. You can make little holders to put stuff in. You don't have to use a moose palm. It's hard to find a moose palm that's straight. So if you want to build another wood holder and try building different cross sections with the vertical punch, it's pretty cool to try. Pressure flakers, the Ishi stick. This is Delrin. I don't use set screws in any of my pressure flakers. They just get in the way. You just taper your dowels. When you pick an antler, just make sure that you get a good one. Some cracked, weathered, dry antler obviously is not very good. Taking a random rack like this, let's look at the tools we can make. So the brow tines make great notchers because they're harder, they're closer to the main beam, so they're generally harder, better antlers. You can cut that off and make a notcher. The tines make decent pressure flakers, especially towards the end. Some deer have really consistent and dense tines, and some deer don't. So you just kind of have to, as you work into the antler, see how I'm filing to the outside? Because the middle is just funky junk. So you just work to the outside and just keep using them. Another thing that you can do, and these are dirt cheap, is get small spike antlers or little bitty ones like this, and if the more skull on them, the better. You can cut the brow tine off, make a punch, and then if you have a bandsaw, you can cut this whole beam down and make little punches or pressure flakers out of the main beam, and it's really good dense antler. So other thing you can do is just take a multi-purpose little punch and then drill it, and then this is buffalo, but you can put antler flakers in those and have just a handled pressure flaker for shorter pieces of bone or antler. For pressure flaking with bone or any kind of bone, it's seasoned is harder. If it gets too dry and cracky, then it's not good. This one is at a stage where it's starting to crack a little bit. These big bones hold a lot of marrow, and there's oil in there. When it tries to escape, it'll eventually crack the bone. So if you get some fresh bones and you want to drill them and then just throw them out, you don't want them to be just in a dry area and just getting tons of sun on them. But if they're moist and dry, is better. And then after a year, they'll season and harden up. That's a buffalo ulna bone. Ulna bones make good pressure flakers and notchers. I haven't used a buffalo ulna bone before, but I'm getting ready to cut that one off. Look at the size difference between it and the white-tailed deer. See how yellow it is up here and how white it is there? This is why these ulna flakers were used in so readily by the natives, because they don't have a lot of oil in there, so they dry out quick. So you get that good hard white bone on the end, and they're just friendly to hold for edge work, for notching. If they're too fresh, they don't work well. The same with the ribs. I just do very little notching and edge work with the buffalo rib. So, but it's hard to say what tools I use the most because I use so many. I do a lot of generic, when I'm just trying to make stuff to sell, because I've done so much direct percussion. I'll use the moose billet and a hammerstone and a braider, and then usually some antler punches to finish the edges. But if you're into replication, depending on where you live and what your projects are, you might want to completely start in a different way. If you just want to make pretty big thin bifaces, then I would suggest going with the Hammerstones that are gritty. As they get pitted, you'll want a finer grit, and then just really learn how to grind those and facet those edges so that you can thin with the Hammerstone. If you're having problems not thinning with the Hammerstone, then you need to turn steeper edges and crack your planes higher and get your thinning done early. And if you're breaking a lot of stuff as you go, then that's just sort of the way it goes. You'll learn pretty quick how to turn those steep edges and work from the ends and get the feedback from doing the early thinning with the Hammerstone. And then really, there's nothing that you can't do with a big Hammerstone and a whitetail billet or a whitetail punch. and you can get a bigger than that. This is actually a little too curved. I like them straighter. But if you can get a bigger whitetail on a shaft punch and a hammerstone, then you can really, make some large bifaces of different kinds. And then the support determines, what sort of signatures that you're going to get a lot of times. So that's it. We've got drilled punches, we've got vertical punches, we've got other horizontal punches. These are just antler and bone, not ivory, buffalo, or wood. Large mass billets, soft hammers, and that pretty much covers. I've got tons more tools in this that I use a lot, but this is basically sort of the more streamlined version. And then I would say, like the different punches I use, like this over the leg or the shaft ones, just don't think that I know, what I'm talking about. If you get into a certain kind of point type that you want to do and you find that a different tool gives you a different look, then by all means try it and let me know what happens. So, okay, well, leather pads, different type of leather, thick and bundled support, all kinds of different questions and benefits that you can get from that, but I won't go into that now. That'll get too convoluted. So if I were you and I just wanted to start with one toolkit and I wanted to go cheap, get an Axis deer antler billet. You can drill the end and make a punch out of it too, and then find you some different hammerstones. You just kind of have to get as cheap a material as you can, or go on a rock run and learn, how to just suffer through the first few months of, making some mistakes and learning which hammerstones work well. A lot of soft finishing hammerstones that work good in the middle thinning, if you use them early, they're just going to break apart. So at some point you have to select the hammerstone for the size of the rock that you've got, and depending on what you're going to be working, I can't really give you more precise instructions on that, but hopefully that was some help. All right.